of the Glory 980 AM, the Glory Media Group, LLC, WDDO AM, its staff, management, or advertisers, but are the views and opinions of the participants of the broadcast.
It is now time for the live broadcast of the NAACP with Gwinnett Westbrook and Mr. Dumas.
Good evening and welcome to another segment of the NAACP Truth Show. I'm Willie Dumas, your host. I'm certainly happy you could join us today on this rainy Monday. But even though it's raining, if you're inside, you're probably real comfortable. Hope you had a great weekend. We had a lot of things going on this weekend. Of course, they had the All That Jazz celebration with Sheila E. And it was a very elegant evening. A lot of fun, a lot of music and dance, a lot of entertainment, and we certainly enjoyed ourselves. Today we have a very special guest joining us. She's no stranger to this show, and that's in the form of Miss Monica Swain with Monica Swain Consulting and Counseling. So she's on the show. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma. We know we've been experiencing watching the Tyree Nichols situation. And we're going to talk about trauma today and see how things such as this affect us, sometimes unknowing to us. So, Dr. Swain, are you on? Dr. Swain, can you hear me? Okay, I think we're having a little difficulty with the phone line, but until she comes on, we're going to talk a little bit about what everybody else is talking about in the news, and that's the Tyree Nichols. Uh, I guess the only way to describe it is his beating that took place there in Memphis, Tennessee. And we know all across the country there were various um, groups that had gathered to protest against those officers that caused his death. And so that's been on the hearts and minds of most people, not only here in the Middle Georgia area, but all across the country. We do know that that video was released on, I believe it was Friday. And once it was released, of course, there were some concerns about rioting and those kinds of things occurring. Did we get our guest on you? Okay, I still don't hear anyone, but I have an echo. Um, let's see if we can find out what's happening here. Okay, are you on the phone, Dr. Swain?
Yes.
All right. Certainly glad to have you on. As I mentioned to our guests, we're going to be talking about trauma today, and I know you see a lot of clients, and this particular topic probably comes across your desk quite a bit.
Yes, it does, and it has so many different phases of it. And sometimes it carries symptoms that are silent, as well as symptoms that are moderate, as well as chronic.
Now, when you talk about moderate, a person who may be experiencing moderate trauma, how can they know that they're experiencing this trauma, and what would be a trigger to cause them to seek help in that regard?
Well, first and foremost, trauma can come in different ways. It can come in sound, vision, it can come in another person. And anyone that is dealing with trauma in the moderate stage, they're going to have more occurrences of the trauma, of those triggers. And the triggers can be controlled, but if the triggers are not controlled, it can exacerbate, excuse me, into more chronic behavior, which could go anywhere from acting out behavior wise to even going so far as into active psychosis from a mental health standpoint.
Wow. And so, would you say that a lot of people, from day to day are experiencing trauma and don't really recognize it? They sometimes, become a little bit more irritable. They may lash out at their spouse or their coworkers or whatever. And do they a lot of times not know that they're experiencing these types of things?
Absolutely. Symptoms of trauma, again, can be suppressed. And a lot of times, what happens is what we call the the psychological of the behavior. It's called displacement. And what happens with that is someone can be traumatized and have suppressed the emotions attached to their trauma, but can go to work or even be at home and be asked something very simplistic that may be centered around their trauma, associated with their trauma from a spouse or a colleague, and give a response that feels like or sounds like it's on level 10 from a question that may have been asked on level 1. So certainly trauma can be suppressed. A lot of times it can look like confusion, it can look like sadness, numbness, depression, blurred effect. It can look like all of those things. And because people are not just connected to traumatic states a lot of times in life because of the pain and the situations that are surrounded, they will transform that behavior or that excuse me that emotion, and they will say something like, "I'm exhausted, I'm overworked, or I'm being nagged at home," because those things are more socially acceptable as opposed to someone saying, "Hey, I was abused and I never sought any help, and my abuse is part of my family." And I
Well,
see that person at family functions, or I have been sexually attacked, or I've been physically attacked, and because I never told anyone, I have to work with these people every day. So it can come about in so many different ways. And I was listening a little bit to you talking about what happened in Memphis. I mean, it's going to be a traumatizing situation for so many different types of people, for the family, for the families of the victim, for the community, for the culture, even for the police department. Because
exactly.
even when we hear about stuff like this, everyone that's in an organization is not a true representation of the organization. So when we look at the situation like in Memphis, there's going to be a spread of trauma, multiple trauma bonds that that community is going to be dealing with for some time to come.
Exactly. And when we look at what happened in Memphis, when you see a situation like that that makes no sense, when you see the brutality that was gone that had went towards Mr. Nichols, you wonder if the officers in the work that they do have had such dramatic encounters that could have played a role in them being as brutal as they were in the case with Mr. Nichols.
It could have definitely possibly played and been a factor. There are so many different behavioral and mental impulses, and when those impulses get out of control, people can be in a state of rage. And until that active rage ends, they are doing whatever, saying whatever. And then the unfortunate part is after such occurrences, you can go back and speak to a person and they have no recollection of what happened during that time period. So
Wow.
that definitely could have played a part. But even more so, the question as a psychotherapist that I would have is if those officers were burnt out, if they were overworked, if they were stressed out, Where does leadership fall into this?
Right.
Because these these people are employed by someone. So where does the leadership and taking care of people and ensuring that people's mental health are not compromised in on any job or in any position? So I would be asking those questions as well because we all know, as anyone that is just has tapped into the story, we all know that they did not follow proper procedure. So what happened in between addressing or approaching this young man to what actually happened? Something clicked. Something happened in between. Let's stop. Let's follow up. Let's follow proper protocol. And now we're doing something so senseless, and now we've lost a life.
Absolutely. And so trauma, not only does it affect, as you said, the family, but it can even affect those who are actually observing the video itself, and sometimes, connecting with the various news agencies on a daily basis. And that too can play a part with individual trauma just from being a viewer. Is that correct?
That is very correct. And the first thing I thought about when I heard about this, Trayvon Martin's parents, I thought about them because now you're talking about this could possibly traumatize people who would never know this family, who would never step foot in Memphis, but who's had a child or had someone that they love that was a male, that may have been an African American male, that was mistreated, that was beaten, that was fatally killed. This trauma bond will go beyond the Memphis community, beyond this young man's beautiful family. It's going to hit us as a country, as a nation.
Absolutely. And it seems, from one incident to another, you don't have time to really kind of get yourself together when there's other incidents that are happening all over the country,
Right.
and all types of trauma. So we're looking at shootings in schools. We're looking at,
Hmm.
brutality, onset of just
Domestic
massive crime.
violence, sexual
Right.
assault. Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
It's so much sex trafficking. It's so much from, there are 8 developmental stages of life, and it is so much abuse and trauma going on from the first stage all the way to the final stage, the 8th stage. And it's unfortunate that we live in this society of this country of sort, having to deal with this, but it is so prevalent, and you often ask yourself, when will it stop? How do we start taking those steps to educating, to being more proactive and preventive in looking at these areas? Because kids are being abused, kids are being sex trafficked. You have domestic violence, you have substance abuse, you have murder, killings, you have you have poverty. That's trauma. So it's so much trauma that plagues people in general, and you just shake your head and just wonder, when do you catch a break? When do you wake up and just not have to go through a day or week and hear something that has been so traumatically shared with us?
Absolutely. See that President Westbrooks has joined us, and I know she
Yes.
wants to join in on this conversation.
Sure.
Yes. I know you were talking about it's a lot of echo and I can't.
Yeah, we're getting real bad echo.
Yeah, there's a lot of um, this video is so disturbing.
I think they're making an adjustment on her mic there.
Okay. Okay. I think I did it.
But I know, Dr. Swain, you've only got maybe another minute or two, and so I'm going to let um, President Westbrooks, go ahead, ask your
Yeah, I
question.
was just saying that, and looking at the video, it's very disturbing, and I can relate to what you say, Dr. Swain
Yes,
was saying, because just me looking at it, you're saying that people can be traumatized by just viewing it, and it's really disturbing, and no one should endure those types of injuries that that cause death, just for a simple stop.
exactly.
It's just, I think we have a lot of work to do with our officers, training, and some of it they are trained. It's just whatever this squad that they have. To my understanding, they've
Dismantled it.
dismantled it now, but it's just crazy. I just don't understand. And then the thing about it is, they go somewhere else and work somewhere else. And if you don't put it in the system where they um, report it, where they can't go somewhere else and be peace officers, they're going to go to another city or state or somewhere else, and find a job in law enforcement, and the same thing happens. So when these type of actions take place, you have to put something in place so they don't so they're not able to work in those type of positions anymore.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Swain, I know you have to go. You've got a client, but we certainly appreciate you coming on and talking with us about this very important topic, because we've gone through so much, including COVID and everything else that we've faced, up to 2023. And so tell people how they can reach you if they are seeking help, and if they're having some traumatic experiences or dealing with stress and anxiety, where they can get proper help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to just say this really quickly to your audience, that the 5 stages of trauma, before I give my contact information, the first stage is definitely denial, because when someone is traumatically hit, it takes a moment sometimes to get past that shock factor. The second phase is anger, because most times traumatic situations are happening in situations where people were not given the opportunity to choose or to have a say in the matter. The third stage is bargaining. A lot of times in traumatic situations, people start to reflect and ask themselves, if I had done this, would this have turned out differently? The fourth stage is depression. Depression is that stage where it kicks in, where it's nothing that can be done about it, and now it's time to actually deal with it. And that last stage is acceptance, where you never forget the trauma, you never forget what happened, but you learn to live in a way where all those emotions that were tied to the actual trauma, you have worked through a process and you were able to release the emotions tied to the trauma. So I just wanted to leave your viewers with those stages of trauma. And my contact information, very easy to find, at info at monicaswain.com. And our website is monicaswain.com as well. Everything is Monica A. Swain. And we're located in the Robert E. Lee building on Mulberry Street, 830 Mulberry to be exact, Suite 204. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for
Thank you.
being on.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
And before we get into the rest of our topic for this evening, I want to first congratulate President Westbrooks on her retirement, official retirement.
Thank you. Thank you.
The NAACP gave her a surprise retirement party at the Fish and Pig this weekend.
Yes.
And then she got a chance to go over to the Sheila E. concert. And
Yes.
so I'm sure she had a wonderful weekend.
Yes. So I just want to make one thing clear. I'm not retiring from the NAACP yet.
Absolutely.
I'm actually retired from the Department of Family and Children Services, state of Georgia. So that was my paying job.
Absolutely.
The NAACP is a volunteer job. So I did retire, and I feel so great. But I'm still working. Mr. Dumas, I was in court just about every day last week, sitting in the courtrooms on probation hearings and different things like that. The young lady that we had been helping, yes, we've been working with. You've actually reported with her a couple times because she was afraid to report.
Exactly.
But got a little, kind of shook a little people up in last week. But she's currently now off probation.
Wonderful.
And so we just want to make, when we're on the show, we're not giving advice because we're not attorneys and we can't give advice. But sometimes people are intimidated and people want you to be ignorant to the law. And when you're not ignorant to the law, they are sometimes intimidated. And just as I went in the courtroom with this young lady, that's the first thing they said: "You're not an attorney. You can't." Yeah, but I can come in as a witness.
Exactly.
The only thing you need to do is swear me in because I have information in reference to her case. But they didn't want to hear, what I had to say for as coming from the NAACP, and a lot of people are intimidated by the NAACP because they know what we stand for. And normally when we come in, something is wrong.
Right.
When we're coming in, they look at the fact that, we think that they're doing something wrong, but which they were. People, a lot of times people are afraid to, when they're on probation, they really feel that they don't have any rights. You got
Right.
some people who know they have rights, and a lot of times they're retaliated against because they know they have rights. And when they try to express those rights, they're retaliated on. And I think this is what happened with this young lady. She was retaliated against because we got involved. But to make a long story short, she went back to court on Friday. The same thing that I had told them. I ended up sending a complaint against the probation officers to another judge, chief judge, and don't know what happened with that. He's supposed to meet with me sometime this week, but at the same time, everything that this judge was saying was in my letter. They ended up giving her credit for her community service, and it wiped all of her fines out, which they should have did that. She's been done this community service since the beginning of last year. So when you don't want to listen, you got a probation officer that does not want to work with you, and even Friday, she was still recommending for her to spend 30 days in jail. And so when she's already done community service, she didn't even owe any money. If they had to listen, they won't listen because the judges and the probation officers think that they're always right. And when I walked in the courtroom on Tuesday, she was screaming and yelling at this probationer just like she was inhuman.
Wow.
And she tried to do me the same way. And the sheriff stood up when I spoke back because you're not gonna holler at me from the back of the where
Bench.
you're sitting from the bench and holler back at me in the back and not supposed to just sit quietly and don't say anything. So you're unprofessional. And when I did speak out, then the sheriff stood up. But the thing, I stood my ground because you're not gonna talk to me any kind of way. And so at the same time, something has to be done. That's why it's so visible. That's why it's so important that we are present in the courtrooms because they've been doing it for so long, and they know nobody is watching, and so they do it. Whether it's right, is it right? No, it's not right. The um 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 but because they're held at higher standards, and
Right.
they have it's someone, she even went into the extent to say, well, she don't have a boss, that the people elected her, but the judicial qualification is your boss because they can make the decision whether or not whether you'll sit on the bench or you won't sit on the bench if they find that you've done something unethical or something that's not right related to the law. But at the same time, this young lady should have never been put in the position, handcuffed. um, she had to give up two of her paychecks, didn't borrow money because they had her in handcuffs, wouldn't even let her leave. And at the same time, she didn't owe the money
Wow.
because she had done enough community service. Um, but at the same time, we're familiar. Probationers need to be familiar with their with their rights. They
Right.
need to, you just have to read. You don't have to be an attorney to know your rights. And when I said that her constitutional rights had been violated, she just flips. She just flipped. You're not
I'm
an
sure.
attorney. You don't have to be an attorney to know that people constitutional rights are violated. If you honestly do not have the money to pay, if you're you know you have bills and special bills that are a necessity, your
House.
housing and different things like that. If you honestly do not have money to pay, then as long as you're reporting, then they're not supposed to be locking you up because you don't have money, and that's why they give you the opportunity to do community
Community
service,
service.
which she had done. But the probation officer, they agreed to let her do her program through another program, instead of you bring it to state court, you let it be done in another court. But then you only want to give her credit for 1 month. This, and like I said in my letter, the way her probation was handled, it was vicious and it was intentionally. Because if a person has done 5 months of community service, why are you going to only give them 1 month? Why when you call, you ask for a specific month, and that's what they gave you.
Right.
So what you should have been doing is asking how much community service has she done. And so, locking people up, making them lose their job, losing their uh, place of living, um, losing their transportation, had a car, lost it. It's just unreal. That's not what probation is supposed to be about.
Right. And that just goes to show you when, unseen, when things go unseen, when you don't have that oversight,
Right.
people do what they
Right.
want to do.
Right. They was, didn't like the fact that we were there, and I'm just sorry, but we're gonna be there. And I think they took her case like the second case, and that was for them to, even though this probation had other probationers that had to come up, she was, I think, the second one. So that was done for me to, I was there so
Leave.
me to leave.
Right.
But when they saw that I was not going anywhere, I stayed there until every probationer went before her. Her whole attitude changed. It was like 180-degree turn, her whole attitude. But I did, Mr. Dumas. I'm going to tell you something. I sat in there at one point and tears just rolled, and I could not stop crying. I was crying unconditionally. I was just wiping tears and wiping tears, because there were several incidents that really touched me, where we had a college student who was trying to better herself. She jailed her for 1 day just to make a point. Why not transfer her probation? Now, all these are misdemeanor charges. These are not felony charges.
Right.
Why not just transfer her probation to the city that she goes to school in, so she can
Meet those requirements.
meet those requirements, rather than locking her up? She's saying college is a privilege. It may be a privilege, but it's also to better herself. But why not? Why lock her up? Because you're gonna continue to lock her up. She's in school full time somewhere else. Transfer her probation. It's not making sense. And then
Exactly.
one man, he was just couldn't even walk. They had to hold him up to get him to the bench, and he couldn't even walk. And then I just literally cried, because he shouldn't have even been there. It's just
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely. But that's the importance of oversight. We see it, played out nationally with the Tyree Nichols situation.
Mm-hmm.
We see it play out locally in the situation you were even involved in,
Mm-hmm.
where certain things would not have been done had, people been there
Right.
to oversee.
Yeah.
And this is going on. This is, just an ongoing thing across the country.
Right. And with this probation, especially state probation, this is not only just happening in Macon. It's been so many articles about state probation because of the way they operate. It's like it's a um, money making machine. It's just
Right.
like, that's what they're there. But we're going to talk about it next week, about some other things that's been brought to my attention while I was there, that I saw. We it's students I mean, the people that was locked up at the park with the racing things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I discovered some things there in the courts on Friday. So we'll talk about that next week because we got a little investigation to do with that.
Absolutely. Well, we thank y'all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Of course, this upcoming month, we'll be celebrating Black History Month, and we'll be getting into a lot of topics dealing with Black history. We know we just celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday on this past couple of weeks ago. And we want everybody to check your local listings and see what events are going on, throughout the city so that you can participate, as well as the events that NAACP will be sponsoring as well.
We're going to be giving out some gift certificates during Black History Month if we can get, if you out some questions that we give out, if you can answer the right questions. So just tune in.
Absolutely. So tune in to us. We'll be looking for you. But until next time, I'm Willie Dumas along with President Westbrooks. Hope you have a great evening and hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you for listening.
Come on, clap your hands, everybody. Come on.